Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this program organized by the American Center in Chennai. Today's program is called Literature as a Vehicle of Environmental Consciousness and Engagement. We're joined by 4 distinguished panelists today from throughout Tamil Nadu, and I will introduce them in a moment. First, I'd like to say that today's program is to commemorate World Environment Day, which is celebrated each year on June 5th. And although that was a few days ago, I think the message of World Environment Day is relevant for any day of the year. So we're very pleased today that the 4 panelists could join us. I would like to thank all of the viewers and listeners who are following us now on Facebook Live for this streaming broadcast. You'll have the opportunity to make comments or to ask questions in the Facebook comments. And we will also have a survey link at the end. We'd love to hear from you what you think about today's program and to give us your feedback. I want to thank my colleagues at the American Center for organizing this program, for both their technical support as well as for today's program content. Our 4 panelists today are Dr. Lilian Jasper, who is the principal at the Women's Christian College in Chennai. Our second panelist is Dr. Fathima Banu, who is an associate professor and the head of the Department of English at the Justice Basheer Ahmed Sayeed College for Women in Chennai. Our third panelist is Dr. Sobana, an associate professor and head from the Department of English at the Bishop Heber College in Tiruchirappalli, or Trichy. Our fourth and final panelist is Dr. Anitha B. She is an assistant professor at the Department of English at the Nirmala College for Women in Coimbatore. And I've been following the news. I understand that there's a new spelling for Coimbatore now, Coimbatore. So again, welcome everyone. Before I turn it over to the 4 panelists, I just wanted to say briefly something about the program. In recent months, of course, we've all been subject to so-called social distancing, and we've had to take other measures in the face of the COVID-19 virus. But at our American Center, we've continued a robust schedule of programming. We've done a lot of virtual and online programs and other engagement with our audiences. And this program is an example of that, how we're using social media to still connect with audiences in South India and indeed throughout the world. The American Center has one of the largest collections of American studies materials in South Asia. We're very proud of that. And when we open up again, we look forward to receiving you and for your visit at our American Center in Chennai. I'd like to now introduce our 4 panelists. I will introduce them by their biographies, and then we'll turn it over to them. Again, our first panelist is Dr. Lilian Jasper. She has a PhD in English literature from the University of Madras and is the principal and secretary of Women's Christian College in Chennai. She has served in various capacities as Dean of Residence and Coordinator of International Quality Assurance, Cell, and Value Education. Having introduced a course in eco literature, she takes students on eco trips to jungles in the Western Ghats. As a United Board for the Christian Higher Education in Asia Fellow in 2007 and 2008, her leadership skills were honed at De La Salle University in the Philippines and at Randolph College in Virginia in the United States. I understand that Dr. Jasper attended a 3-week leadership training program at Harvard University in 2018, and that in January of this year, under her leadership, WCC received the Indian Express Thank Edu Award from the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu. I welcome Dr. Jasper to our program. Our second panelist is Dr. Fathima Banu. She's a professor and head of the Department of English at the Justice Basheer Ahmed Sayeed College for Women here in Chennai. She's the head of the department and associate professor of English, and she teaches undergraduate and postgraduate classes in English literature. She has a distinguished academic record, having topped the MA English examination of the Osmania University in Hyderabad in 1984, for which she was awarded 3 gold medals. She was awarded a Fulbright Fellowship for her predoctoral research, which she spent at the Arcadia University in Philadelphia. She was awarded her PhD in 2009 for her thesis on subaltern voices in select novels of the civil rights movement in America. And I welcome Dr. Banu. Our third panelist today is Dr. Sobana from the Bishop Heber College in Tiruchirappalli. She serves as an associate professor and head of the Department of English, and she has more than 25 years of experience teaching undergraduate students, and she has led the department since 2013. Her specializations are English language teaching and Canadian literature. She has also taught eco literature to her students. She edits the magazine Literary Explorer and is a member of the college magazine board. She's been the coordinator of the Computer Assisted Language Learning program for the past 6 years. Our fourth and final panelist today is Dr. Anitha B. Again, she's an assistant professor, at the Department of English at Nirmala College for Women in Coimbatore. She's been working there for the past 15 years, and she has over 10 years of experience in teaching postgraduate students and 15 years of teaching undergraduate students. Her specialties are American literature and Indian writing in English. She served as the chief editor of College Magazine and has compiled and published an in-house book called Literature for Competency. She's published broadly in scholarly journals and other articles. Her explorations into literature have enabled her to organize symposia, seminars, and literary competitions. So for a panel on American literature, I think we're very well represented by these 4 individuals, and we look forward to hearing from them. Before we start, I just wanted to share one of my favorite quotes from Henry David Thoreau, who, as you may know, was a mid-19th century writer. I'd call him an American yogi. Perhaps he's associated with the Transcendentalist movement. He wrote Walden, On Civil Disobedience, and other works. Henry David Thoreau said, "In wildness is the preservation of the world." And that's one of my favorite quotes from an American writer about nature. With that, let me turn it over to our first panelist. We'd love to hear from you, Dr. Lilian Jasper. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Moulik, and good evening to all of you. Literature and environment are both restorative and so refresh and rejuvenate us. Environment in literature has been purposefully worked on in literature departments in India during the last 15 to 20 years. With the rapid deterioration in green spaces and the increasing dependency on gadgets, as many of our students are more hooked onto gadgets than to deriving simple pleasures like watching a bud unfold or observing a dragonfly or butterfly in flight. This has become rare on the one hand, while on the other, we have individuals, literary scholars, and other seekers who have sought to fill their inner emptiness with the proximity to nature. Today, we read about forest bathing, the art of connecting to nature through our senses, and how nature helps us to unplug technology and stress and helps us relax, probably through the natural oils, which are part of a tree's defense system that protects it from maybe bacteria and fungi and insects. Literature has also helped humans do this. And over time, we realized that the environment within literary texts helps us to relax and unwind. Most of us who grew up in the 80s in literature departments have been fed with Shakespeare. And this is one of my favorites, that Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream, for example, happens on 2 levels. One bit in the woods, while the other in the courtroom in Athens. The woods, with its tall trees, lit up by an ethereal moon, helps resolve complicated issues and brings harmony, though initially everything seems to be much more intricate and complicated. The Forest of Arden in As You Like It is another case in point. It is an escape from everyday hassles, and there is midsummer madness and enchantment. We see these themes repeated in various texts, American texts especially. The protagonist, Harry, in Hemingway's Snows of Kilimanjaro, or Annie Dillard in Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, or Thoreau in Walden are all examples of this. Annie Dillard's spiritual quest at Tinker Creek and Harry's redemption through the symbol of a lone frozen leopard on Mount Kilimanjaro, in spite of being surrounded by vultures and hyena, point out that our redemption is through the natural world. Simple living and self-reflection help Thoreau come to terms with life itself. He says, I quote, "I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach and not. When I came to die, discover that I had not lived." So if you truly want to live, then you have to come to terms with nature and be close to nature. Another interesting factor is that the environment is usually not something exotic. It is usually the writer's own backyard, both in the case of Annie Dillard and Thoreau. I'm reminded of Aristotle, who said, "In all things of nature, there is something of the marvelous." In 2018, I had the privilege of visiting Walden Pond and was told that it was a gravel-rimmed hollow full of clean water, and the scenery of Walden is on a humble scale, though very beautiful, and it is an unassuming body of water. Most often, literature highlights the fact that beauty lies in our own backyards and that immersing ourselves in it is a way to leverage our connection to the natural world. Of course, in the snows of Kilimanjaro, the location is exotic Africa and the protagonist is on safari. And Harry, due to his profession, had traveled all his life. In the most significant moment of his life, nature helps him to connect with his innermost being. Cities are exciting, innovative, full of energy, but also stressful, lonely, and bring on panic attacks, addictions, and depression. So Harry turns to nature to open his senses, to see, listen, smell, taste, and touch, which helps him to reset, evaluate his priorities, and eventually heal. Literature emphasizes the human-nature interaction, and as Rachel Carson's Silent Spring warns us, indiscriminate abuse of nature, which stems from distancing oneself from the environment, can be disastrous. I would like to conclude in Thoreau's words. We need the tonic of wilderness. So I would exhort you, in Thoreau's words, to live in each season as it passes, breathe the air, drink the drink, taste the fruit, and resign yourself to the influence of the earth. Thank you.
Dr. Jasper, thank you. That was an excellent overview. Very good, salient examples from American literature. And I see that we're both fans of Henry David Thoreau, which is fantastic. I would remind our viewers and listeners that they can post questions in the Facebook comments. We'll try to get to those later in our program. But let me go ahead and now turn it over to our second speaker, Dr. Fathima Banu from the Justice Basheer Ahmed Sayeed College for Women here in Chennai. Dr. Banu, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Berkana. I'm very happy to be a part of this panel discussion. And literature always holds a mirror up to life, and nothing can escape its lens, be it the natural or the human world. And here I would like to present Rachel Carson's Silent Spring to my viewers to have a better understanding of the environmental issues. Can I have the slide, please? Next slide, please. Yeah, here is Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. And Rachel Carson is an American marine biologist, conservationist, and an author. And her book, Silent Spring, was a bestseller for more than 3 decades. And what is so amazing about her work is the fact that she talked about the inseparable bond of man with nature. And to quote, but man is a part of nature, and his war against nature is inevitably a war against himself. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, and Rachel Carson has been lauded as a trailblazer as she ignited an ecological revolution depicting the thread of pesticide abuse, and that was DDT, which was nicknamed the insect bomb because that DDT had become a household name, and a rampant use of it in aerial spraying was used to eradicate the gypsy moth and the fire ants. And it was Rachel Carson who, you know, who brought out the evil effects of this DDT and its toxic effects that it had and on the natural ecosystem, which led to pesticide resistance and to more invasive insects. She also talked about the silencing of the bird song and how many birds were destroyed because of this toxic element in nature. She also talked about the effect it had on human beings, which led to cancer and other diseases. And her book became a trailblazer because of its factual accuracy and lyricism. Rachel Carson did not really want to educate and make people aware of environment, but she also wanted them, to care and nurture environment. Next slide, please. Of course, she had her own share of detractors, especially the chemical industries arrayed against her, people who called her a hysterical alarmist and a communist. And Robert White Stevens, an American biochemist, stated that we would return to the dark ages and the insects and diseases and vermin would once again inherit the earth. But Rachel Carson remained steadfast in her tirade against the rampant use of pesticide. She did not advocate an overall ban of DDT, but advocated a biotic approach and a responsible management of pesticides because she felt the chemical barrage has been hurled against the fabric of life and it was capable of striking back in unexpected ways, as the world is witnessing today with COVID-19. Next slide, please. Well, the impact of Silent Spring was so huge that it led to political action, and President John F. Kennedy's Science Advisory Committee issued its report on May 15, 1963, on basis of Carson's scientific claims, which was a great victory for her. Carson also made policy recommendations and testified before a United States Senate subcommittee, and her relentless efforts established the Environmental Defense Fund in the year 1967, and she was also the federal government was also successful in phasing out the use of DDT by the year 1972. Her relentless efforts also led to the US Environmental Protection Act and the Clean Air and Water Act for the citizens, and also the celebration of the Earth Day. Next slide, please. Her legacy inspires scientists, biologists, ecologists, academics, and humanity at large. Former Vice President Al Gore, who had a great fascination for this book, wrote an edition of The Silent Spring in the year 1994. And in the year 2012, Silent Spring was designated a National Historic Chemical Landmark by the American Chemical Society for its role in the development of the modern environmental movement, which was a great victory for Carson. Next slide, please. Rachel Carson had her share of accolades and awards, but the most important, significant of all was the highest civilian award of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which was given to her posthumously in the year 1980. And of course, many Rachel Carson prizes were established to be given to women contributors who wrote about protecting the environment. And her book prize was meant for any book that is written with a social or political relevance on science and technology. Carson's global reach can be seen in the Rachel Carson Center set up at Munich, which inspired and promoted interdisciplinary research. Next slide, please. Well, for our students who are interested in a deeper study of environment and literature, we have the Association for the Study of Literature and Environment, which was established in the year 1992, and the journal, the Interdisciplinary Studies in Literature and Environment, which popularized terms like eco-criticism and ecofeminism to the layman. Thank you.
Dr. Banu, thank you very much for that presentation on Rachel Carlson's Silent Spring. That is indeed one of the important works on this topic in the United States. And I loved how you connected her book to the wider American society. You talked about her legacy, including different reforms in American society, including legislation that went on to protect the environment. I would just observe, you talked about Silent Spring, and Dr. Banu, when you were speaking, I thought in the background, I could hear afternoon songbirds. And I thought that was sort of a nice symbolic, like, the birds are still here. So thank you very much for your presentation. So as I mentioned, we have 4 speakers today, 4 panelists, and we have our first 2 panelists are here in Chennai. But we're very happy to extend our reach broader in Tamil Nadu. Our 3rd and 4th panelists are from other parts of Tamil Nadu. Let me introduce now our 3rd panelist, Dr. Sobana, who's from Bishop Heber College in Tiruchirappalli. Dr. Sobana, over to you. Thank you. Dr. Sobana, are you there? Okay, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Dr. Sobana is there or not. In the interest of keeping the program going, I might suggest we move to our 4th panelist and come back to Dr. Sobana. Maybe there's some technical difficulty there. If Dr. Sobana is there, please unmute your microphone. Okay, let's go ahead and move to our 4th panelist. I see that she's ready, Dr. Anitha B., who's joining us from the Nirmala College for Women in Coimbatore. Thank you very much, Dr. Anitha B., for joining us. We'll go to you as our 3rd panelist and come back to Dr. Sobana later. So Dr. Anitha B., over to you. Thank you.
A very good evening to one and all. Thank you, Mr. Moulik. What are we going to give to the next generation? Let us give to the next generation a hope, a green world, and intrinsic value to appreciate and realize the serenity and stability that must be retained with other forms of life. And so let us now be a voice of reevaluation of relationship between man and nature. And as we are all aware of the fact that humankind is the first species on earth with the intellectual capacity to understand the present crisis of environment, and who is also conscious of the fact about the nature of the techno industry, which is fast encroaching upon the world surrounding, devastating the living conditions of the future generation. So what we essentially need is not a narrow transformation of a present society, but a complete rejuvenation of man's relation to nature. But of course, we have started working towards it not only from the literary point of view, but an awareness of preserving environmental issues have resulted in varied dimensions leading to interdisciplinary approach. Now, considering the growth of American literature in large have paved the way to create her own identity after 50 years of the Declaration of American Independence in the year 1776, which was then the period of imitation. But then American literature was quick to establish her own identity, which is equivalent to Socrates saying, know thyself, look within, there lies the reality. Now, when we look within, each one of us is pure and humane, which metaphorically means that the entire universe is within oneself. Directly, it implies that man and nature has direct harmony with each other. So it is this return to oneself or return to nature that led to great literary output from the writings of Emerson, Margaret Fuller, Thoreau, Melville, Hawthorne, and so on, who has explored human life in the context of nature. So take Emerson's work, Nature, which is being considered as the most powerful manifesto to the contemporary world. Thoreau's Walden is a dynamic portrayal of moving away from the modern world and is seeking to renew the self by returning to nature. So the important feature of all nature writers is to portray how life is a continuous one or an endless one with the life of nature. Now, to focus more on ecological perspective in literature, every writing distinguishes how an individual must acquaint with the eco-aesthetic consciousness and the awareness based on ecology and its preservation. In a way, eco-consciousness is a binding strength to human for a harmonious relationship with the non-human world. At the same time, nature is a medium through which life develops because nature is a prime source of value and meaning. So ecology is identified with values such as balance, harmony, purity, unity, strength, and economy. Moreover, literature on ecology strives to redirect human consciousness to a full consideration of its place in this vulnerable natural world. Many times our idea and representation of nature are sometimes dangerously turns out to be anthropocentric. In a sense, we cause harm to environment when we place humanity in the center of the nature. So to wipe out the environmental crisis, we need to work towards an ecocentric perspective in which we ultimately consider the interest and well-being of non-human along with those human. So to widen the critical perspective on eco-literature, we have Lawrence Buell, the most prominent American environmental literary critic. In his work, The Future of Environmental Criticism says, the aim of eco-criticism is to change our attitude towards nature and environmental problems. So the writings of ecology concentrates how human represents environment and how human can create an optimal relationship with non-human world, expressing values that constitute ecological wisdom. In this respect, it is significant to mention Thoreau's work, Walden, or otherwise called as Life in the Woods, is being considered as a cornerstone of American ecological literature. Of course, a classical nature narrative describing how Thoreau spent 2 years in a small hut in the woods on the banks of the Walden Pond in Massachusetts. So it is a rejection of the urban life dominated by commerce, where he says, men have become the tools of their tools. A gesture which we understand, where we have to rediscover ourselves, we have to alternate our identity. He also emphasizes on the fact that every living things have got a right to live, and it is that we have to realize it, understand it, and then respect and care for the nature which is getting destroyed. Similarly, Annie Dillard's Pilgrim at Tinker Creek also provides a classic vision of landscape. So, close reading of reading of her work also gives us an analysis, an argument for an ecological values, a sense of admiration or reverence that one must have in our engagement with the more than human world. So to conclude, our effort and function is not to remake nature that it is fit for humankind, but as Thoreau says, to make humankind right for nature. We human must realize the fact that we are only sharing the natural world. And so if we are not part of the solution today, we will be part of a greater problem for the future. And so eco-consciousness and our engagement must bring an inner transformation that will help to rediscover, to rejuvenate, to strive more from ego consciousness to eco-consciousness, giving, and environmental justice, which is possible only when we have a revolutionary thought in every individual. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Dr. Anitha B, for your inspiring remarks. I really enjoyed that. That was a great overview with many, many examples. And again, you drew upon some of my favorites, the transcendentalists, Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau. So thank you very much for that presentation. And thank you for joining us again all the way from Coimbatore. We have another speaker, our fourth and final speaker. Before we move to her, I just want to remind our viewers and listeners that you can post questions in the Facebook comments. We are getting several questions coming in, and we look forward to fielding your questions. But first, let's move to our final speaker of the panel, Dr. Sobana from Bishop Heber College in Tiruchirappalli. Dr. Sobana, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm there. I'm in.
Okay, great. I'll turn it over to you now.
Yeah. Yeah. I would like to dwell on the synergy between literature and nature, particularly trees, and the existential wisdom that this synergy teaches us. And many of the texts that we have prescribed here in our study, they speak more of this existential wisdom through the teaching of literature as propounded by William Rooker. And eco-theological consciousness is propounded by Casey Abraham. And ecofeminism as put forth by Ms. Legler. And so finally, at the end of the day, a field like, a study like eco-literature or eco-criticism, which is, as all of us know, a postmodernist, a deconstructionist study, which turns upside down the constructedness of language and which focuses more on the essence of being over the seemingness, like how Walt Whitman, the great poet, says, the seemingness or the seeingness of anything is bowled over by the essence of being, is what this existentialist wisdom teaches us, that which results as a result of the synergy between literature, as we read and teach, and nature. And so literature as Rooker, I would like to start with Rooker, it's because Rooker brings it out very clearly and emphatically and in a very fascinating metaphor. He metaphorizes a poem as a sun, or he metaphorizes sun as a poem. Anyway, is possible. So he equates a poem to the sun as a storehouse of energy. And he says literature is an enormous, ever-increasing, wonderfully diverse storehouse of creative and interesting, he uses the word cooperative energy. This is where comes in the multiple meanings that people can read into a piece of poem, multiple readings from their own various sundry backgrounds, be it America or India, wherever we live. We can read into a poem that's written by an American or an Indian or an English or a Spanish. Our own regional social meaning into it. And that doesn't mean that these meanings exist distinctly, but it means that they cooperate with each other, which means that there is a lot of a sense of empathy that Rooker entertains here in the definition, in the kind of theory that he puts forth as to what this literature must do and what its very nature is. And so poem is open for multifarious meanings, readers' responses, and exactly what will make the poem live for generations together, the longevity the antiqueness of the existence of meaning is equated to the antiqueness of trees. Trees, the massive structures of trees, the trees that grow for years together, and they grow organically from within, from inside, and because of external agencies also they grow, and organic growth, the antiqueness, age-old life that it subsists on is what is equated to literature that lives for years together, and is what is equated to wisdom, wisdom of existence. And so this theme looks the most ideal thing that suits environmental study. And so dwelling on the various writers, the first person who comes to all of our minds is Thoreau, who celebrates this existential wisdom very much, the silent teaching as to how to live and love and what optimism really means. And Hermann Hesse is somebody I would like to mention here. It's because of the way he remembers trees as so many things that these trees stand for. The trees are sanctuaries. He says the trees, they live from eternal life, and these trees they are metaphors of labor of love. They are living examples, and they are epitomes of labors of love. And so Hermann Hesse is somebody from whom I would like to start the whole discussion. And of course, after Thoreau comes Rachel Carson, who is popularly known as a sea poet because she's a marine biologist. Her conscientiousness about earth preservation and the great job that she did by writing a narrative about that pesticide and how it resulted in the banning of it, and all those are indelible from history. But this Rachel Carson also entertains, when it comes to the discussion of trees, kind of a sense of uncertainty, a sense of mysteriousness about nature, and it's the massive structures like mountains and trees that thrill her, that excite her, that also make her believe in that nature does contain these two great qualities of uncertainty and mysteriousness. Next in our the list comes Ernest Hemingway. He is a very interesting writer in the sense the language itself acts like nature for him. You must have heard of what is called as an iceberg theory that we often associate with Ernest Hemingway. And his language worked in such a way that whatever he expressed, whatever he brought forth in his writing, in his narrative, was just the tip of the iceberg. And when the iceberg would drift, the rest of what is hidden would be exposed, which means again, very much like how Ruckert explains it, loads and loads and layers of meaning hidden inside the iceberg. Now, what the writer writes is just the tip of the iceberg. And so his very writing, his very language, the way he constructed sentences are nature-like, is something very interesting to note about Ernest Hemingway. And Frost, we know, is someone who interposed human psychology, especially the paradoxical and the ironical elements of human living, the ironies and paradoxes of life. He interpolated on the ironies and paradoxes in the uncertainties of nature. Frost, and that is what we see in Stopping by the Woods too. And Dillard again is fascinated by the way the trees outlive, according to her, even the sun, she says. And this is how we come to know from each of the writers a sense of awe, wonder, a sense of excitement, a sense of fear, a sense of inadequacy on the part of the humans to overcome the mysteriousness, uncertainties that the nature unfolds to us sometimes, which we're not able to know for sure what they mean. The beingness is terrifying, and the current situation, of course, the beingness is terrifying, and and all these, take us towards understanding that we just have to wait to see what life unfolds before us until the time we are nailed to our coffins. And that's the best lesson that we can learn from nature around. That's what literature teaches us too. And coming back to Ruket, that's what Ruket has been meaning. Ruket for us had meant in his essay, Literature and Ecology, when he says that a poem is a storehouse of energy, ever increasing, enormous energy, which is creative. It doesn't mean that only the writer can create, but every reader can create a meaning out of a poem. And there can be so many meanings, sundry meanings, a variety of meanings, but all these meanings are meant to be cooperative. We know that William Ruket was basically an educationist, and he was a teacher, and he worked in a college of education. And so he was handing out actually a teaching theory, a teaching methodology as to how to teach literature. And so the best way to teach literature is to just give a poem, hand out a poem to the students and make them to interpret the poems from their own backgrounds, points of view. And the way in a class of about 30 students or 40 students, all these sundry meanings could be read with a cooperative effect, with the facilitation of the teacher. That's what a teacher is supposed to do, with the facilitation of the teacher. Without the teacher, the facilitation must be there from inside all of us. And this is how we read into this synergy, literature and nature, the existentialist wisdom. And thank you for the opportunity.
Well, Dr. Sobana, thank you for those remarks. That was an excellent overview with many, many examples. I especially liked your focus on trees. I think that's perfect, and how you brought that out with many different examples is very good. Of course, Hermann Hesse, a Swiss-German writer. I'm also a big fan of Hermann Hesse's works as well. Well, thank you to all four of our panelists. We have just about 15 minutes left in our program, and we've received many questions. Let me address a couple up front. Some of you have asked when the consulate would reopen, or when the situation about schools opening in the United States. And the easy and true answer is, we don't know. In terms of the consulate, we're of course taking precautionary measures. We want to make sure that we open consistent with health guidelines from throughout India. We're looking to our embassy in New Delhi for guidance, as well as right here in Chennai. There's a lot of steps that we will go through before we reopen, just to make sure that it's safe for everyone to visit us again. I would encourage you, keep looking at our social media to see when we reopen. And in the meantime, we'll continue a full slate of virtual programs like this one. In terms of schools opening in the United States, there's a lot of debate about that and a lot of discussion. And here in the United States, oftentimes it's up to each individual state. There are 50 states plus the District of Columbia. I think it's a similar discussion in India and around the world, that schools are not yet sure when they'll reopen. In the meantime, many schools, of course, are going online and virtual. Many of you have asked, our viewers and listeners have asked questions in general about the environment, and these are excellent questions. I think in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and confine our questions to the intersection of the environment and literature. I think for broader questions about diesel spills or reducing our carbon footprint or air pollution, I think there's enough existing guidance out there about, more conscious ways to live, more conscious choices we can make as consumers and how we live our lives. I think there's a lot of good guidance already out there. And just given the fact that we have just under 15 minutes to go in our program, I'm going to just select the questions that are very topical to the environment in literature and that intersection. So we have a few questions about the contemporary situation of COVID-19 and how literature, consciousness of the environment can help us maybe understand or draw inspiration. We're hearing from Suhash John, who asks about COVID-19, can people really come forward to understand what can be done, including rural and tribal people? This is a question directed to Dr. Jasper. We'll start with you, Dr. Jasper, but if other panelists want to contribute afterward. But so Dr. Jasper, the first question again is about COVID-19 and the ability of literature perhaps to help us face this situation or draw inspiration. Dr. Jasper, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I think literature makes us more mindful of others, and makes us more sensitive. And when you look at environment, usually what happens is that you take environment for granted. For a long time, that is how we've been reacting to the environment. But of late, there's more sensitivity, there's more understanding of how we need to go back to our basics to make life meaningful. And we've been trying to derive from Thoreau. Of course, there's been a lot of criticism about these people who have lived life close to nature. Even Rachel Carson faced a lot of criticism. But today we understand that a life which is moving away from all this, back to the basic sort of things, is only going to be detrimental for our own existence, and moving away from literary texts also, for that matter, because people feel that literature and the arts are not as important as maybe studying about rockets or nuclear science or whatever. But that was what gave people sensitivity. It gave people more understanding about various things and so on. So environment and literature are crucial for our existence, for mankind's probably survival in many ways, I would say. And we have to sort of think in terms of, what our ancestors had done and go back to that sort of life. Literature and environment are integral for the existence of mankind, and that's what COVID has proved today, I would say. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Jasper. That's a very comprehensive answer. Given the fact that COVID-19 is still a hot topic, let's say, do any of our other panelists have any remarks on that before we move to the second question? Briefly, any of our other panelists want to jump in? Okay, let's move to our second question. Several viewers and listeners have asked about eco-criticism. There's different questions on that. I know that some of you addressed the issue of eco-criticism in your presentations, but Dr. Banu or others, Dr. Sobana, Dr. Anitha, do you have thoughts, anything to say about eco-criticism?
Yeah. Yes, eco-criticism is a kind of an environmental literacy, just as computer literacy is the need of the hour. No, I think environmental literacy is also very, very important. And that is, which develops a sensitivity to the environment, and where people, where they read literature from the lens of environment, and literature has a calming effect on all of us, and it also, kind of spiritually binds man to nature. So eco-criticism is a kind of a study which helps us to have this bond with nature and to nurture nature and not master it, I would say.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Banu. That's a good answer for eco-criticism. Here's a question about, let's see, this is from S. Parivel from Queen Mary's College, asking about environmental protection and why there are only very few successes. For example, we saw that with Silent Spring, that led to changes in American legislation to protect the environment. And S. Parivel is asking, Are other works ignored? Or is Silent Spring sort of a unique, singular example that would inspire broader reform throughout society? I'll open it up to our panelists, anyone who wants to address that question about Silent Spring.
The book side, can I answer that?
Okay, Dr.
Yeah.
Banu, please.
Yeah, the book Silent Spring created a ripple effect. I think that is why, many people refer to this book, because it created a ripple effect that has lasted till the present times. Though it was written more than 6 decades ago, still it is still relevant in our times. And it also led to a lot of federal legislation, which is what gave the book, its value for modern times. And that is why, everyone who talks about eco-criticism refers to Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. The book did not just speak to academics, but it also spoke to laymen and housewives and common people, and made them aware of this problem of pesticides that can be toxic both to the natural world as well as to the human world.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Banu. We're getting a lot of good questions here. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time. Lydia Shirley Ravikumar is wanting to expand the discussion to include Commonwealth literature. I think that's a great idea, but given the fact that we're focusing just on American literature today, a program designed by the American Center, but we hope to maybe have an expanded discussion, maybe a comparative study for a future program. Given the fact we just have about 5 minutes to go, and we've heard from Dr. Jasper and Dr. Banu, I want to move to Dr. Sobana briefly for any sort of wrapping up summary remarks. We're all seeing the questions here. So Dr. Sobana, if you want to speak for just a moment or two, and then we'll go to Dr. Anitha for any final remarks. So Dr. Sobana, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you. So all of us dwelt on literature and environment, especially in the context of American literature. The way literature informs conscientiousness about nature, and the way nature needs to be addressed through literature. It's because literature is an emotive medium. Emotive medium has a better appeal to the readers. And so for centuries together, from time immemorial, we've been using literature as a means to address social concerns, very imminent ones, and nature's ones as thing, is what we all of us touched upon. I would like to answer Ms. Brinda, somebody, I don't know if it's Ms. Brinda of the American Center Library, who has asked me about this iceberg theory. This iceberg theory is usually associated with the language of Mr. Ernest Hemingway. The way he constructs sentences, sentence constructions that he does, they're complex. They're complex in a sense. They're philosophical. They are sentences whose meanings they address directly the existential dilemma or the angst, whatever, whatever the mood of the existential problem that Hemingway chooses to discuss. He answers directly that problem, that mood of the problem, that the sentence becomes philosophical, reads philosophical. It doesn't much refer to the plot of the story. It reads philosophical, and so it's like an iceberg. And if you will trip off the iceberg, which simply means that if you read more into it, you unravel meanings, layers of meanings. And so whatever Ernest Hemingway writes is just the iceberg, it's just philosophical, it's just the exterior. There are layers and layers of meaning inside is what that means. And it's generally associated with him. I don't know who first used it in the context of Hemingway's, novels. I don't know, I'm not sure. if even Hemingway himself used it about his writing. I'm not sure. It must be some critic's remark. And so that is it. And so
Okay.
as a concluding, yeah.
Okay, Dr. Sobana, thank you for that. Thank you for those remarks, and thank you again for joining us from Tiruchirappalli. Let's go now to our fourth and final panelist. We just have a few minutes to go. Dr. Anitha B. in Coimbatore, any summary remarks from you, please? Dr. Anitha B., are you there? Okay, perhaps
Yes, can you
there's
hear
a...
me, sir?
Yes, please go ahead, Dr. Anitha B.
Yes, sir. So we all know about Sir Thomas More's Utopia, where he has said, which means no place or good place. It is very difficult for us to make a good place, but we can always make a noble, that is a noble understanding, a noble initiations can be still made to make a better environment as we are passing through COVID-19. The survival of us today is a question mark, but still we will have hope for ourselves and for the future. Thank you.
Wow, that's a great place to conclude. Thank you, Dr. Anitha B. I want to thank all four panelists, Dr. Lilian Jasper, Dr. Fathima Banu, Dr. Sobana, and Dr. Anitha B. Thank you very much for your time and expertise in sharing with us here today. And I want to remind our viewers and listeners, there's a survey link in the Facebook comments. We'd love to hear from you, your feedback about this program. And we look forward to seeing you in the future on other virtual programs organized by the American Center here in Chennai. Thank you, everybody. See you next time.